Hey everyone, welcome to another video. I'm Narnia, and today it's time to talk about the books that I've read in the first half of December. Can't believe it's December already, by the way. I have finished 5 books, and as is a trend, the last couple of wrap-ups, I also DNF'd one book, so I'm going to start with that one. And that book was, let me check the name, because I DNF'd it so hard that I forgot a lot about it, but it was Kaptein Mikalis by Nikos Kazantzakis. So it was historical fiction set in Greece, and it was a fatty. It was like this big. You'll see a picture here, but it's about Kaptein Mikalis, and he was going to be some kind of war hero in a conflict between Greece and Turkey, and he's on an island, I think Crete. So I was interested in that whole conflict, but it was very dryly written. Just not my kind of historical fiction. I like my historical fiction to not just be this very manly. Also, I felt just description of facts. I just liked a little bit more feel. So I think I DNF'd it after 20 to 30 pages. Not my thing at all, but I think that people who like just longer, slower, well, it's slow and it's action packed at the same time, but it was very, this man on the island, and oh, a horse comes, oh, and he has one enemy, and that kind of story. Then I think you will like it, but it was really not for me, and I'm happy I DNF'd it. The 2 other books I won't also talk about very much now are the 2 other Narnia books that I have read the past 2 weeks, and that is Prince Caspian and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. As I said earlier, I am doing a vlog about these, so you'll see a video where I talk about all of them. This is the 4th and the 5th installment of Narnia, and we get a little bit more humans in these ones, as we have the Telmarines that come to Narnia, and they play more of a role. Luckily, we have 3 books that I am going to talk about, and the first was another historical fiction, and it is called Circa Bastard by Jaap Scholten. It's a Dutch book, and Circa Bastard would translate to Sugar Bastard. So this is about a period of history in the 1950s and 1960s where Dutch men were sent to Ethiopia to build sugar factories, basically. There weren't a lot, but this was as a result of a friendship between Haile Selassie and the Dutch Queen at the time, and they had become friends during the Second World War because they were both hidden in England, basically. So there are 3 parts to the book. 2 are in current day and it talks about the results of those young men going to Ethiopia, because as you can imagine, they stayed there for a couple of years, and they were living these lives where they were treated as kings. They were treating other people as if they were kings. They had a lot of money, and they were also in relationships with a lot of the women there, or well, not necessarily relationships, but they abandoned women and they abandoned kids. And the book starts when there's a TV show in the Netherlands that talks about families that get reunited after a lot of time because someone was adopted or something like that. And there is a man in Ethiopia that claims that he is the son of one of the factory directors. So the factory director himself is already dead, but his kids, and especially his grandkids, because they are somewhat older, are revolted at the idea, and they want to find out what's what. So one of the grandkids, who is 40 to 50, he's the main character, and he goes to Ethiopia to find out what's what. That's the first part of the book, and he ends up going to Ethiopia with kind of the love of his childhood, a woman that he has wished after for years and years, and she has a father who also went to Ethiopia in the 50s and 60s, and he ended up staying there. So he abandoned his child in the Netherlands, and she wants to find out about him because she only learned that recently. So she wanted to find out about him, about his life, and about why he abandoned her. So that is the 3rd part of the book. And in the middle part, we get the story of one of these young men that, again, go to Ethiopia. The middle part is the part that I liked most of all, because it talked about their lives there, and again, like I said, how they were kings and how they were treating other people. What I liked also about the young man and his wannabe girlfriend go back to Ethiopia, we also get a little bit more of the consequences of the Netherlands going to Ethiopia for this project. And how that linked then to Haile Selassie. We learn a lot about Haile Selassie and about other things that happened afterwards in the past, and I really like that. The tone isn't always great, especially the first part, and I don't know if it's the first part because we learn from the point of view of this young man that goes to Ethiopia to find out what his grandfather did. I don't know if it was his voice that I didn't like because he was not always very positive towards other cultures. I didn't like his tone in that. He was a bit condescending. And I don't know if I got used to that later on in the book, it didn't bother me anymore, or that it was really just his voice and that it got better. Because I felt the second part where we learn from the young man that goes to Ethiopia in the 50s and 60s, I felt that was different. There was still some kind of looking down, but it was a little bit less condescending somehow. But yeah, I mean, it's a big book, and I didn't like all of the parts, but now reading more and more books that from the own voices of the people that are from a country and how they look to the people that conquered them, or the people that conquered, colonized, and the people who were misusing them. This was again seen from the point of view of, well, it's not the colonizer, because the colonizer of Ethiopia was Italy, but of a group that is essentially still making profit off of other people's backs, because they weren't these men that were building these sugar factories, they weren't teaching others to do this. This was just them making bucks and bucks. So yeah, seeing that point of view again was interesting, and I think also very valuable, because it makes you a lot more aware of how we from the West internalized all of this looking down on other races. Now I see what it does a little bit more. So yeah, I did enjoy this read. I'm not sure if I really like the writing because of the condescending tone a little bit. It was still an enjoyable book, an interesting book. The other book that is set in another country that I read is by Eka Kurniawan, and in Dutch it's called Schoonheid is een vloek, and in English this would translate to Beauty is a Curse. I haven't checked whether that is the title it also officially has, so you'll see that in the link below. And it has been translated from Indonesian, and in Indonesian the title is Kancik Itu Luka. So this book is magical realism and a little bit of historical fiction, and it starts with the best opening sentence. I'm going to live translate, but it says, in an afternoon during a weekend in March, Devi Ayu stood up from the grave after having been dead for 21 years. It's a great start of a book, right? So we meet this Devi Ayu, and we learn during the whole book about her life from childhood, also a little bit of her ancestry, and she grows up to be a prostitute, and she gets, in the end, 4 daughters, and we also learn a bit more about not necessarily the life of the daughters, but more the love lives of the daughters, so the men that they get involved with. There is a lot of violence in this book, and a lot of rape also as well. And I'm gonna talk about the rape as part of the violence, but one thing that I struggled with is that the violence was treated in a very matter-of-fact kind of way, so I didn't really like that style. The style did make me think also a lot with the magical realism, and the voice, the feel it had, made me think a lot of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's books. I only read 100 Years of Solitude by him, but it had absolutely the same kind of feel, the same kind of absurdity, the same kind of, I mean, we'd get less of a big family, because in 100 Years of Solitude we have generation after generation after generation, and right in this one we have, let's say, 3 to 4 generations, and we focus on 2. So it has less of that, but if you like Garcia Marquez, then you are absolutely going to like this as well, because again, it has that same level of absurdity and of, you know, the style was very similar. It has less magical realism and a little bit more of what happens in a city, because it's set in Indonesia, and it starts when the Dutch are still colonizers, and then we go through the Second World War, where the Japanese took over, and the period afterwards, also when there are more guerrilla tactics going on, and at one point there's also communists. So you do get a little bit more of a sense of the history. So I enjoyed this. It's not really this nonchalance about violence. It's not really my thing, and I didn't. The characters, they're also weird that you can't really relate to them. But I'm still happy that I read this, and apparently Eka Kurniawan is described as the next big Indonesian author. So I'm happy I got to read um, a book by him. Last but not least, I read a memoir, All Boys Aren't Blue, by George M. Johnston. So this is written by George M. Johnston himself, and he talks about his youth, his teenage years, and also a little bit when he's a young adult. And he talks a lot about the intersectionality between being black and being queer. And he talks about what that meant for him, and what that meant in his family, and what it meant in his upbringing. His family they are so heartwarming, they are so loving. It did me so much good to see, because these are difficult topics, right? There's a lot of violence also included with them, when you know that black people, that queer people, that they're very persecuted. And the love that he got from his family, the way that his family dealt with this kind of things, you could see how that made him who he was, and I loved that about it. So yeah, this was really good. It wasn't a very big read. I think I finished it in about 2 days, and I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in how these two questions of the racism that there is in the Western world, how that then intersectionalizes with being queer, and how much that influences your everyday life, and how all of these things that we take for granted, we as, I'm saying we for myself, white, cisgender, heterosexual, everything, how that is not the norm for other people. So yeah, this was a very good book, and I do recommend it if you're looking for. I mean, there are some. He does get. There is some violence in this, but most of it, I'd still say it's a very hopeful book. So those were all of the books that I read in the first half of December. As always, talk to me in the comments if you've read any of these books. I'm also curious as to how you're doing, because Christmas now with Corona is going to be, well, holidays with Corona is going to be quite different. And I know that it weighs a lot on other people. If you ever need to talk about that, feel free to do so. And I'll see you guys in another video. There are a lot of videos coming up. I like this time of the year because everybody's going to be reflecting and making plans, and so we've got a lot of those coming up. Anyway, I have rambled enough again. I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.